Okay, I think we can get started. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the Istio Networking community meeting. We have several items on the agenda and quite a lot of discussions I suspect we will have around virtual services today. So I propose we start with the less debatable items, so which are the 101 status, and maybe like Kostin would like to have 15 minutes to talk about the split Horizon EDS proposal. That's a very new thing, so I guess people will need some time to digest it, and then we can cover the virtual services part. I hope that's okay with everybody, especially those involved like Brian, Louis, Niraj into the virtual services API changes. So related to 101, there are a few things that we need to deliver as soon as possible. A couple of them are some security fixes. So we discovered that the privilege true is turned on by default now in all injected sidecar. So we need to actually turn this off for most of the platforms except OpenShift.
Yeah, well.
So the proposal is to add a Helm flag to be able to turn that on. So the default will be a privilege false, right? Not enabled. We will still have the netcap admin privilege set to true as before. So for that, we have the other proposals to be able to get rid of that. And the other security issue is the fact that we don't strip the x-forwarded for headers when the gateway is an edge proxy. So that means somebody can spoof that header and, cause some bad things to happen. And the proposal there is to add a Helm flag to in the deployment of a gateway to specify if that gateway is an edge proxy, which will basically turn into num trusted hops equals 0 in Envoy. So that what Envoy will do, it will strip all the x-forwarded for headers if we do that. Okay, so if you have any questions or concerns about that, please go in GitHub and add comments there. There are the two open issues. I'm going to actually maybe add them here. And the next is scalability, which is a fairly big issue in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll let you, Kostin, talk a bit about that.
Yeah, that's actually more like 102 issue, not only 101. As probably you saw, we did a number of optimizations because Pilot was using far too much memory. But the optimization went into the three most commonly used CRDs, which is Virtual Service Destination Rule and Service. Pretty much everything else in Istio, all the other CRDs will also need to be optimized the same way. The root problem was that the config generation was calling model far too often, and it was not caching the results. And we really need to cache because there are a lot of people use the large deployments. So that's something that will need to take some engineering resources and contributions from everyone in both networking, security, environments, and pretty much all areas. And we'll need some way to kind of coordinate so we can move ahead with this project. So, and most likely we'll cut the 102 when we make enough progress, and if we have another large chunk of improvements, and we'll keep going and gradually move to until we cache all the resources we need to cache. We are currently testing, I believe, with 1,000 services, and I think few thousand, 5,000 endpoints, which is relatively low. And again, we're trying to increase this to some reasonable number, which again needs to be determined what do we expect. And 5,000, 10,000 services, and if I remember correctly, we set 1 million as endpoints, but it's probably not going to happen in this in 102. But please jump in and send PRs or help us with this effort because it's critical.
So, Kostin, do we have some issues people can take on?
Well, they're not
Or
I don't think we need to, we have enough bugs that are impossible to find. I mean, it's already, I don't know, 600 or how many we have. Creating a bug for each CRD is probably not very productive. We'll spend more time creating and closing bugs. But if people want to file bugs and to track what they are working on, that's wonderful. I'm not volunteering to create 51 bugs.
Yeah, no, but like maybe a list of things so that can be, divided and conquered.
Yes, we can. Yeah, I don't know how we conquer. I mean, it's everyone is familiar with what they are working on. The security team has the policies that mix. I mean, every team has a pretty clear set of CRDs and optimizations as in it, and any other optimizations that you can find, it's welcome. That's and there is one thing that we are still waiting 101 on is Piotr is looking for memory usage in Envoy because we are using too much memory for each cluster. That's it. Any comments? Shriram is Shriram around? He's also kind of spending a lot of time on this scalability.
There'll definitely be another round of optimizations, but what we have now, as Costin says, goes up to 1,000 services. We certainly need to do some more that YAML conversion business, and we'll keep pushing. But I think the main thing right now is the late startup time of pods, and it seems like it's a combination of like some memory issues in Envoy, and then some form of there's some lock somewhere in pilot that's actually serializing everything, and that just needs to be sorted.
Yeah, sorry, Pietro actually fixed the Envoy startup time, which went from 30 seconds to below a second due to the stupid optimization in GCC or whatever it was. And yes, throttling is still something that, Shriram is right. I forgot. We need to, there are some dials that we need to document about how to optimize and how to tune Istio for a large number of, for large clusters. Okay, that's it. A lot of work left.
Okay, so any question related to this?
Well, looking for volunteers. That's the main thing. That's
okay.
No questions.
So, Costin, if you have concrete items, you can also send email and
yes, that's.
Okay, so the next topic is the split Horizon EDS. Do you want to share your document?
Yeah, can you click on the link? I'm sharing this kind of.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. Or if you want,
I don't know if you can look at it.
If you want to use this, go ahead and use it.
Yeah, no, it's not. So I just wanted to let you know that one of the proposals that we are discussing for networking as part of the big zero VPN and non-flat network. It's a very narrow proposal. It's relatively simple to do in pilot. It's probably orthogonal or aligned, I don't know, with the other proposal and other work that Shriram and Zach and other people have done to solve this problem. Let me know if the proposal sounds acceptable. It's proposing simply to return different results, different EDS results based on caller, and to automate the setup of gateways when you have multiple clusters. That's it.
Yeah, it looks pretty reasonable to me, actually.
Okay, well, that's.
And I think and I think it's complementary to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Like, I think the idea of Pilot being able to serve across clusters is valuable and orthogonal to the concerns around like blast radius and per cluster failure zone and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So just please take a look, comment. We'll try to squeeze it into 1.1. If people are interested in this subject, they're welcome to help implement it. It's not a huge priority, but it's, again, something very nice to have, and we want to make progress on this area as we go.
So is it like a P1 for?
It is a P1. Yeah, zero VPN is a P1 right now. I mean, unless people want to make it a P0. But yeah, Sriram, you want to?
Okay.
So Costin, I haven't read this in detail, but this is along the lines of the same type of thing Robert and I have talked about. Yeah, I think this, I mean, from what you describe here, it looks great. I'll have to read it in detail.
Okay. Okay, my job is done. I mean, just wanted, I don't want to, kind of get approval. I mean, just want to make sure people are following this and to make it clear that it's very narrow and is not trying to solve all the problems in the world. I mean, there will be separate documents for the other problems of the world.
Right. And so the question is, so this is the proposal, and are you going to actually work on it, or if somebody wants to work on it, they can work on it?
If someone gets to it before me, that's wonderful. I probably spend the next few weeks working on scalability and this, again, I said this is P1, not scalability is P0.
Yeah.
And if by the time I finish with scalability, this is implemented, I'll be extremely happy. If not, I'll probably have to start working on it. But again, it's not a lot of code. It's more kind of getting on the same page with everyone else and agreeing to go in this direction. That's
right. And also, like, it will be testing with multi-cluster, right? So it's
yes. One of the motivations for this is I'm doing a lot of testing with using the multi-cluster setup. I mean, my laptop using the mesh expansion and Envoy connecting to the central cluster, and it will help my testing and the scalability work that I'm doing. That's kind of how I ended up.
Okay, good. So so if there are no more comments on the split Horizon EDS, we can move on to the virtual service related topics. So it's good, like we have roughly 45 minutes, which is excellent. So Brian, you sent a proposal about Istio Hostname Ownership. Would you like to present and talk a bit about this?
You can open it.
I think it's better if he presents, because he can scroll through the document.
All right, let me try to present here.
Yeah, there is a button there. Should be. I'll actually maybe stop sharing. Let's see if it's easier now. Yeah, we can see.
All right, can you see the doc?
Yep. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, so there's a lot of comments on it. Thanks for all that feedback. But the general overview is things like VirtualService are using hostname as sort of a shared resource. So whenever you make a VirtualService resource, it has side effects for the entire cluster. So if you can have two different VirtualService resources that talk about the same hostname, and there's no real clear ownership about who can create those resources via something like Kubernetes RBAC. So this proposal is about sort of associating hostname ownership and with namespaces in Kubernetes, so that you can limit which hostnames a virtual service resource can refer to based on the hostname that you're creating it in. So that maps to Kubernetes RBAC. It's not about changing the side effects of what that virtual service resource can do once it's accepted, just about where you can create them. And then, of course, every namespace has a default domain, so you can automatically create resources with that domain name. But if you want to refer to other domain names, you would have to create some sort of binding or to allow that hostname to be configured. And so I've got a proposal here for this traffic binding, name notwithstanding. And whether we want to do just host names or maybe some other resources, I think that's an open question. But before I sort of go into questions about the proposal specifically, is there any questions about the problem itself?
No, the problem, I think everyone is agreeing that it's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, just one question. Are you assuming this merging of virtual services kind of proposal is in place for this, or is this independent of that?
So I wrote this not assuming that was in place. And because of that, I only focus on host name. a virtual service. There was no merging between different host names for virtual service, so that this made sense. If the merging goes forward, I think we're going to probably have to add path prefix to this association as well, so that you can limit. If you've got a shared host name amongst different teams, you can limit which prefixes those teams can configure as well.
Right. Okay.
One question I have is, who is the authority that decides which namespace is owning whatever? I mean, is it Istio system? I mean, would those resources be restricted to Istio system, or can anyone put these kind of resources in any namespace? In your example, you have, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not making any opinions about that. I'd assume there's some sort of network admin who gets to divvy up public host names. And since you can restrict which types of resources different users can create, you could restrict the ability to create these association resources to only whoever you think is an admin. And then likewise, divvy out the ability to create virtual services in those host names to whatever teams you want.
Yeah, my question here is that RBAC is wonderful, but very few people, really understand it, and it's not so easy to kind of put a correct configuration where only some specific users who are admins have access to a namespace of a team, and it's a bit risky, in my opinion. As opposed with saying, for example, that you need to put all the resources that delegate or that control ownership into Istio system and simplify, basically. It's not.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it'd be a really good idea for the default install, if we go forward with this, to basically do that. Allow that in only Istio system. I think we can create some RBAC roles to do that. So in other words, come out of the box with some good roles that allow what you want. Maybe create a new global hostname namespace that has the ability.
The default install should basically be what it is today, where anybody can define anything, and it's up to you. And if you shoot your own foot, it is what it is, because otherwise it will break backward compatibility with everything else that's out there.
Yeah.
Then as part of the ops guides, you should have a doc which says, hey, this is what you should do in production if you have a multi-team system, and or if you're having multiple teams operating on the same Istio mesh, then here are the things that you have to do. And this way the impedance, the surprise factor and the sticker shock was much less when people actually go and play with this, and then they're like, oh, this is not working, that's not working, and so on.
Yeah, the other thing, sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
And the other thing I want to, so that was for and to Costin's point, I think there are multiple ways of solving the problem, and their solution of doing this RBAC thing is a nice one. And I'm saying we need to see how this evolves in terms of how people are actually trying to use and different systems they're coming up with before we settle on one specific mode saying this is what Istio will support. So until then, I would like to see this be kept as a separate one that we can enable, and we will be happy to enable as part of the default install, but not pull in anything into the Istio core until we see how things are working, and then actually
if to kind of extend on that a little bit, I think tying a host name to a namespace really isn't what we want. What we actually want is an RBAC permission on the host name itself, right? So if you have some permission to modify this host name, then resources that touch that host name, you have permission to modify. That's really what we're trying to model. And you associate it with namespace because that's convenient in Kubernetes.
Correct.
But sorry, go ahead.
I'd say, this is specifically to allow Kubernetes RBAC to enforce that host name to Istio resource binding,
Yeah. So it feels like it's like I understand that that's the practical side of it. It feels like bad modeling. It doesn't. Tying host names and namespaces isn't really the semantic, especially once you start to get into hostname delegation and things like prefixes on the host name are managed or belong to different services, and those services belong to logically separate namespaces.
Yeah, I actually agree with Zach. To me, it seems a bit unnatural and too restrictive to tie the host name with a namespace.
Yeah, really, we're just overcoming shortcomings of Kubernetes RBAC.
What I'm saying is that this is basically what I was hinting at. These two guys are feeling that it's not natural, and others feel, oh, this is like nice, but so this could effectively be enabled as sort of an alpha extension that people, and in the ops guys, that we just let people, users go and try this out, and we see how they are reacting, how they are like, to this thing, and see how they're using it, and then we can make a more informed decision in terms of like, okay, this actually makes more sense or this doesn't make more sense, because actual field testing will give us a lot more information than this directly.
Yeah.
I mean, it is clear the problem is still there, right? So the fact that anybody can use hosts in any way. So I like how this a proposal attempts to solve that existing problem, right? So the question is if we have different solutions. I mean, this is great. It highlights the problem. We have a potential solution, right? Do we have other solutions? Like, can we do this differently?
Of course, we have many solutions for this. I mean, it's not, again, one is to, instead of using per namespaces to tie by identity, which is what normally is done in RBAC. So you specify that only specific service accounts are allowed to control the host name wherever they want to create it, which may be done with just RBAC. I mean, if we just have RBAC rules that specify role binding and as part of the resource, you specify the host name, you bind that host name with an account, and you can enforce it in pilot or in whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be enforced by RBAC controller. It can be enforced by pilot itself. I don't know.
I think you go with that.
Yeah, the problem with pilot enforcing it is that then it makes it incongruent with other Kubernetes RBAC, right? Like Kubernetes, it breaks how Kubernetes API policy works.
So this is a better option for the galley, where like if we have a nice dependency injection framework, that it's sort of a preprocessor where when a configuration is being ingested as part of that, not just that mission controller or like, as far before it ships the configs to pilot, this thing is actually going to go and validate, and then it's going to spit out the errors, and what it ships to pilot is the final set of configurations.
Yes, that's perfect as well. Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah. That way, in my mind, that's models without having to. We can use it. We can try to.
I mean, if you really want to model it even kind of more specific, bespoke ways, you can always do it in CI/CD before any of this kind of gets to Istio.
But not everyone has CI/CD systems in place. I mean, that's already possible, but it's not universal and it's not easy.
Yeah. So like, I think it's a legitimate request to use Kubernetes RBAC to control some of these Istio style permissions, right?
Or Istio RBAC.
So, but aren't there like cluster-wide RBAC permissions? Like, why do we have to do it per namespace? Because you can actually define permissions that apply cluster-wide. Right?
We can, but that's a bit harder, and you don't want to mess up too much with cluster-wide.
Okay, so then maybe what is wrong is the association with the namespace instead of the service account. Yeah. So if we just like replace namespace in this proposal with the service account, we might be in a better position.
But that's the question: is the better position or is not a better or more complex position? Because one benefit of this proposal is that it's very clean and simple, and I like this about this proposal.
It's not clear to me. It's not clear to me how you would map a service account into these resources via Kubernetes RBAC. That I think you have to do it by creating these resources in specific namespaces.
Yes. So and that's really the problem with right. This is a Kubernetes RBAC modeling problem. That's why I said that originally, right? It's like we just can't actually model the resource that we care about to describe policy about it, because Kubernetes doesn't let us do that.
But Istio RBAC
Istio RBAC can, and I think a galley plugin specifically, so that we can enforce the right semantics for people using the Kubernetes API server is an excellent way to implement this.
Should we maybe look at the Istio RBAC for this then?
No, we can. The question is,
won't work, right? Because that is being implemented at Envoy level, and it's just flowing through pilot into Envoy directly. Istio RBAC, I mean, we can use the same syntax, but then
same syntax, yes.
Yeah, no, the API, not the implementation.
Yeah, the galley has to be implemented on its own in order for the configuration stuff. But that might actually, it allows us to probably have more what do you call, a better system in some sense, where we can be more expressive and not necessarily have to shoehorn one into the other, but we can actually be like, okay, for virtual services, here are the RBACs, and it can just be a first-class abstraction.
We can actually model our domain. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think maybe this needs to be presented to the security team also to see what their view is on whether Istio RBAC could be, at least the API level could be reused in some ways to render these.
Istio RBAC today is dealing with which services can access which other services. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because this is, I'm trying to model here which configs are allowed into the system, and I'm not sure if the overlap there is beneficial.
So we mean the API. So like the literal RBAC, the Istio RBAC API objects can be used to describe policy for service-to-service communication, but also we could, the goal, we're looking at, can we reuse it to describe this case as well?
To clarify, I mean, the RBAC rules are not service to service, are workload identity to service, as far as I know.
Right.
So fundamentally, they're not based on the service that is calling, it's based on the account, service account that is running as that service.
Yeah.
So it's still identity based, not.
Yeah, so RBAC may or may not work out, but I think a domain-specific model for this would actually be, but it's good to start with this, and then we can definitely have at Galley level a config RBAC which says who can define what, but then the question of how do you assign roles and how do you enforce those roles or verify those roles, especially because this is authored by humans, so you have to probably authorize them with something, I don't know, LDAPs and so on and so forth, right? Active directories. That is a much more open thing.
Well, but so if you constrain the problem to Kubernetes and Kubernetes RBAC, there's already means to get an identity based on external stuff, right? GCP, you can get identities. That's one of the convenient things about using Kubernetes RBAC for this case.
But it's not Kubernetes specific. Any system that exists today for configuration has a notion of a user, authenticated user that is allowed to make changes. Which is tied to the actual, either the CI/CD system or a real person.
Yeah. My point is that Kubernetes is taking care of this already for us in the form of like I could kube control, and it uses the correct principle. It correctly translates my local credential into a Kubernetes identity, which we wouldn't have to reinvent, right?
If I can raise another point here is it will be very useful to see how this maps to the other proposal for virtual service delegation and other things, because somehow they are very closely related and we don't want users to have to deal with 5 different APIs that look differently.
Right, that's why I grouped them together. Today we have a bunch of things about virtual services. Yeah, so I don't know, like Brian, would you like to say something, because there was quite a bit of feedback. So
So there's quite a bit of feedback. I don't know that I want to take the time right now to go through some of the intricacies of the proposal itself, but with regards to the delegation versus service merging, I think that this works in both cases. Like I said earlier, if we're going to do merging, I think this proposal should include probably also ports and path prefixes as things that you can associate with a namespace, so that you can control down to that level. I'm not sure. We'll have to talk about merging and how fine-grained that can be, and whether this is too simplistic or not for that.
I think right now the plan for merging is a simple concatenation, and it's not more of a merging. So where we just simply take like a virtual service and then combine 2 of them for the same host, where we just append all HTTP rules from one into the other, and that's just it. And that alone would get us much far. And with that proposal, this would just be. This has no relevance to that actually, because this is, the rules that apply for one virtual service will apply for the others as well, because it's only focusing on the host names and not on the contents of HTTP, TCP, TLS, or Mongo routes that you define inside the virtual service.
So I guess what I'm going to say about this is I'm going to add path prefixes to this doc. I didn't want to do it while everybody's making so many comments. But we probably should go talk about the other ways of merging virtual services at this point. So I'm going to update this doc probably later today or tomorrow with those extra details. But let's go to the next topic, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
So let me see. So actually, the next topic that I have here is super merging of virtual service, Louis, and he's not yet here. I wonder if we.
Yeah, we can speak to that.
It's very simple. The common problem is that things like Knative and then the ingress and so on, people just want to be able to define multiple virtual services for the same host. They don't need delegation. They don't need anything else. I mean, they're effectively saying that they by themselves are partitioning the paths and so on, and they can guarantee that there won't be any. So in that case, it's just a very simple matter of combining all of them into one giant resource and then shipping that to, within pilot before the code takes over and generates the config. And simple examples being when we've seen for those of you who are looking at the mailing list, right? People just define a gateway and then somebody goes and defines a virtual service and define the same virtual service again with a different set of paths and targets and so on. And we just want to be able to support that. Same thing applies for destination routes as well, where different people come and define different subsets. And
Sriram, a quick question on that. So I like this proposal because it handles the most common use cases, which is, like you said, a common host name with with non-overlapping prefix paths. But do you want to then limit it so that you can't have regex expressions in there?
So I think the contract that we would offer as a starter is that if you supply two virtual services with the same host, and then we literally be concatenating one sort of HTTP rules from one end to the other. That's just it. And then it's all up to you in terms of ordering them and making sure that there is no conflicting path prefixes that will resolve on each other.
Well, we can be a little bit smarter than that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Here there's at least some simple ordering we can do. So regexes are totally a different problem because but if we look at just specific path prefixes and that kind of thing, we certainly can order them correctly for the user.
Yeah, the least we could do is, or at least the only thing we can do is make sure that the catch-all path is always in the end, and everything else is just basically in the order that was specified. So if
we can always do longest to shortest, maintaining same relative order to get better matching.
So my proposal has been, and I feel pretty strongly about it for performance reasons, is to have something where we apply exact matches first, prefix based second, all other regex or whatever, and at the end the default. And the reason for that is that you can do very efficient implementation of hash map lookup for the exact path and equivalent for prefix. And if you sort this out, then the regex of course will always be slow. Nothing you can do about it. But at least we can have a scalable implementation of this.
Yeah. So I like, Constant, what you're saying. The only other simplification which we can think about is maybe when you have regexes for the same host name, because we can't merge them properly, does it make sense to reject the configuration at that point?
I don't know if rejecting configuration is actually a simplification as far as the end user is concerned, as opposed to testing.
Yeah. It's probably not necessary if we can restrict them to prefix. We say we first do prefix matches. So each regex should also have a prefix match.
Well, that's hard.
Not hard.
No, but
if it doesn't have, it's applying to. It has lower priorities than prefix matches. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, but then you might as well just pick arbitrary concatenation order,
right?
Or aged concatenation order, and just tell them that's what we're doing. And if you have a problem with that, go move your stuff around.
Yeah.
Sure, that's also reasonable.
By the way, we cannot really reject the configuration if the validation is done in pilot and configuration comes from down.
No, reject means we don't apply.
It means we don't send it to Envoy and we set the operational status to invalid or something.
Right now, we don't have the feedback. And the rejection could be order dependent, right? You create A, resource A, and then resource B, and then you go and create B and then A.
Exactly.
And then you get non-deterministic behavior because the last one is rejected always.
No, you have to mark all of the affected resources as,
Well, we don't have that.
No, we do have that.
Yeah, no, we have to implement this.
Right, so we don't have
as part of the feature, right?
We do have
in pilot, not into the CRDs.
Not in the CRDs, but user can get, Prometheus, Grafana, they can see what that configuration is.
Right, but it's still order dependent.
It is because we choose to.
Right, and that means that we are going to have inconsistent behavior almost by definition, and we should just avoid that problem for now.
Yeah.
We can come back to it later when we have a better feedback system, and we've got a little bit more user feedback around this.
I agree. I mean, if we have CRD status fields and if we can solve the problem of when you start up again, if the results are predictable, that's the best thing, I think.
Yeah.
But now we're into kind of P2 issues.
Yeah, this P2 just want to make
Yes.
sure, again, in terms of feedback, having an alert generated by Grafana is probably more feedback than looking later at CRDs and looking at the status.
You can have both. Nothing prevents
Sure.
you, right? If I don't have to have Grafana and I'm just a very minimal user of Pilot, I would like to have the
Maybe.
CRD status, and that's applicable also for other things. For instance, there are customers creating virtual resources and they start sending traffic and they get 503s or 404s because the things are actually not ready. So we can even have in the virtual service something to say that's not
And how
ready,
it will help them.
you know.
Okay, well, let's partition these things because there's lots of use cases about resource status that are not related to this, like canarying. So let's, for the moment, just pick an arbitrary merge and leave it at that, so we don't have to deal with the API concerns.
Yeah.
So we can track that as a separate issue. Like, I'm not saying we don't track it.
Not
but,
arbitrary. I mean,
maybe we just
we pick an arbitrary merge policy, right?
Yeah.
Which the one you just described is
which is not. I'm just saying it's not arbitrary.
Okay.
It's based on
So,
scalability.
like it's, no, but it's not. It's actually well defined. It's not
Yeah,
It's
arbitrary.
arbitrary in the sense that we just waved our hand and said this is the
we just
order.
picked it.
Yeah, this is the convention.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So actually, I mean, I have a thing about the date, using the oldest date as a criteria.
That's a strict requirement for production, I think. There is no way we can do it.
You have to have some backstop.
Yeah.
And you need to give priority to stable configuration. I mean, whatever is in production wins. There is no question that a new configuration should be rejected versus old.
But can we just say, instead of so when we have two configs, right, that are conflicting, we will always just reject the last config. It's not that we will apply kind of both, and the result will be the oldest one. So the user have to go and look into each resource timestamp to understand which one
we will
is.
Document and say that it's the oldest one that got thrown out.
Okay, so that's why. So the newest one. So that's why the oldest one, actually, because that will help us in case we, like, the oldest one already got was sent to Envoy, right? So we have some running Envoy config with the oldest resource, right? And something new comes along, we detect a mismatch, something we don't like, we invalidate the newest resource then.
Yeah, late rejection.
Yes.
Okay.
Delayed rejection.
And so we have to document that if they want to get rid of the old resource, they have to delete it explicitly.
Yes.
Of course.
Okay, I think Frank.
Would it make sense to try to combine the old V1 model of precedence field with this? Like maybe have a precedence field optional at the top of a virtual service that could be used to say, oh, I'm being rejected because I conflict, but I want to be in front of this other thing. So
I think we could do that as a follow-on if we got strong user feedback that it was necessary.
Yeah. So
because the actual the suggested mode is having one virtual service per host, but in the case that you end up defining 2 or 3, then we just merge it so that you don't have the element of surprise. But
like, I think a lot of the use cases here could be addressed by allowing you to create effectively the delegation, right? At the top level, I want to split apart a URI into sets of logical services, and then I want to handle each of those logical services separately.
Right.
Yeah. Or we should be able to do that in Ingress.
Or by merging back into one resource.
Exactly, which is fine. But as long as it's semantically separate, right? Like,
I think the merging is really the way you want to do this use case. I added it to the issue. I added a little scenario of this. I think this is the case I've heard of. Everybody I talk to sort of has this same question. They have an application with some website they host that they basically call, and then it's all delegates out to different services that are owned by different teams. So they want to put all the virtual services, for each team, for each microservice, kind of separate, but they want to merge it. So I think that's the most common use case for why we even need this merging, right? And that scenario, though, seems to me that if the virtual services themselves could have some kind of global context type thing that says, kind of here's the match context for merging or something like that for all of the rules. So then I don't, in every single rule within the virtual service, have to say, if this header is this, do this, but also, and that the paths are this, this, or this. You have to put that in every rule if you're going to merge it, unless you can put that in some higher level place. And then if we don't want to have delegation in two different things, then I'd like to see maybe that as sort of a global context thing that you can specify at the top level of the virtual service.
So Frank, you're talking about having a sort of a match resource almost, right? So something that is going to be shared among multiple like virtual service rules, right?
Every rule within this virtual service has a global context of match, half foo or bar, slash
right.
bar. So I sort of give sort of a global match at the top.
Yeah, I like this.
Right, so,
like
the delegation does that for you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Delegation is attached to a match.
Yes.
Yeah, but we don't have a match resource, right?
No, we do.
No, we do. So
delegation requires you to actually have somebody separately own the top level virtual service that has all the paths in it. I think people like to be able to, each team who can specify their paths in their virtual service. So then,
so there's no conflict, Frank, between like a match and a delegation, and then the delegated thing having basically suffixes of what the top level match was, right? So it's basically strict subsetting.
Yeah, but it's all that's all put inside of a single resource that the team owns, as opposed to with the delegate model, you'd have a virtual service that has the paths in at the top level, and then separate virtual services for all the rest of the rules, right?
But the fact is that top level thing is a shared resource. You can't get around that.
Exactly. So whether you have it via matches or whether you have it via a parent virtual service which delegates out, you have the same problem.
Yeah, that in my opinion, that's
more problems actually, not the same
modeling
problem.
the situation.
Yeah,
like
I think capturing because when you have a top level matcher and then multiple virtual services inherit that, you still have to associate them somehow.
And
if I understand your proposal correctly, Brian.
I think, okay, so maybe I didn't say it clearly enough. Instead of having a virtual service that has the matches in it, so there's two scenarios, right? The delegate model, which is the one where you have a virtual service resource, and in that you have a bunch of paths and they all delegate out to other virtual services. Somebody owns that and it's a shared resource. Then each of the teams that are implementing the different paths have their own virtual service, and that's where all the other rules go in. So that's model one. Model two, which what I was proposing is, instead of having this top level resource, within each of these team virtual services, right in there, there's essentially a list of rules, a host, and things like that. You could at a top level inside of that resource say, oh, here's the matching that activates this rule, any of these rules. So I would say that /foo and /bar are my matches, and then I can now have a list of rules, and that's implicitly now anding those all. But the difference here is that the resource, the team that actually is implementing pass /foo and /bar is putting that information into their own virtual service resource.
So instead of delegation, it's an attachment, basically, in a way.
Yeah, I think it's a feature of the system that they have to go into a global resource and claim /foo and /bar.
Yeah, I think it's as much about a permissioning model as it is about the means of producing a unified routing structure.
And having the right people modifies the right configuration, because they are different. I mean, we don't want every team to claim and to put arbitrary rules and you know, there is a lot of confusion, a lot of user errors that will happen.
Yeah,
so we have to make it easy for the team and also for the network admin. So there are two different personas here, right? One is the network admin or the mesh admin, right?
Yes.
And the other one is the actual like owner of the service.
Yes, and the owner of the service should not be exposed to things that he should not break. I mean, it's
exactly.
So you guys think that it's really preferable to have a separate owner of the high-level paths for the application?
Yes, as part of the implicit permissioning model, yes.
And part of the explicit permission model as well, because the previous proposal that we discussed was exactly that will require anyway a central resource that will specify which host name is authorized by whom.
Okay, fair enough. So that was really the only issue, though, that prevented me from thinking the delegate model is better than merging. Like, why do we need both? Why don't we just go with the delegate model then?
So we have some very specific use cases around merging that mostly feed in from automated provisioning of facets of the virtual hosting system. Right, one is Kubernetes ingress itself, right, because of the way it's defined, right, so we get user pressure from that. By implication, all the tooling that was built around Kubernetes ingress as a mergeable model, i.e., let's encrypt certificate provisioning systems. And then thirdly, the expectation that we had set with customers previously with route ruling around merging, which has now caused some customers to feel like we have left them high and dry. And they have CD systems in place that are producing artifacts that are mergeable, and they're wondering why we can't merge them for them.
Yeah. So I think the merging does kind of handle all the cases in my mind.
Except for the permissioning model.
Other than this trying to separate out the, the permission, the ownership of the paths kind of thing at high level.
But that's important. I mean, both permissioning and not making mistakes. I mean, it's not only that you have permission, but you should not accidentally take over someone else's domain and working configuration because you put the wrong rule.
Right. So we have this dialogue going on, right? I mean, Brian wrote up the permissioning, the ACLing model around hosts, which we're having an active discussion around. We could extend that to also define things around URL namespacing, and then we wouldn't need delegation to manage permissioning. I think there's still an open debate about how exactly we want to do that, but I think we have a good start in that talk.
Yeah, we talked about that right before you came in, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Louis, another thing would be, so I think if there are more complicated cases where you want to do routing based on headers, the current implicit or convention-based merging does not help you. That's why I think these two can exist in conjunction rather than separately.
I tend to agree. I just want to get through the permissioning discussion in its entirety before we make a final decision, I think. That's all.
And I want to raise again the point of scalability and performance, because not everything that looks nice on paper can be scaled. And if we get into I mean, again, headers, maybe we can deal with them in an efficient way. Regex certainly we cannot. And arbitrary match rules, definitely we cannot. So that's the other aspect. I mean, we need to scale.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you are also doing delegation, in that we can come up with some constraints saying what we can merge and what we cannot.
Yeah,
that still applies.
What we can merge efficiently and what we cannot, and let's leave the one we cannot merge efficiently for future version, and see if a user really needs them. Then we'll try to find a way to merge them efficiently. But
I mean, I think that the one that's outlined in the issue is a very reasonable model for us to do for the first implementation. Punt on regexes, merge the things that we know we can merge sensibly, and call it a day.
I would actually like us to start with some incremental approach. I mean, just merge the exact path to start with the map implementation, and then go ahead, Sriram.
I think the proof in the pudding would be the reduced number of like user complaints and mails, and like, if you find that thing drops to almost 0, then we've already done it. Otherwise, it's like, if the more fancier things we do, and if it just opens up a completely new can of worms, it is gonna be nightmare. Right. So it's start with a simple one and then just see how things go.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to revisit, right? Obviously, merging only has a minimal, it doesn't have any effect on the API, right? So we can make some changes to how the merging occurs over time, right, based on user feedback. I was a little careful with it, but
that's why I think it should be a tool. Like, we should build a tool that does merging. We can implement different merging strategies, test them, see how it works.
People have very different expectations about that right now.
Yeah, and also so hold on a bit, because I hope we will not merge the issue and save it as a CRD, not the issue.
Well, we could.
No, we don't need to do that. Like, we should do just like
CI/CD system,
conceptual merge of this, and just like so that's going to be operational status again. We're not gonna merge the actual resources.
I do not want to be in the write back realm.
No, not write back. Yeah. But if you use a CI/CD system, you could have, as Zach saying, a merge tools that is.
Right, you can certainly use a tool. That's your responsibility to use it. I think the issue we're facing right now is that some people can't.
No. For those obviously we need to integrate that tool into.
Right. So I think the first phase is to implement the basic merge, whatever we agree on.
And the code could be used in a tool for short term to validate different concepts.
To validate is fine, but the actual code will be in pilot, I guess,
it will have
not
to be in
even in
pilot.
Gale,
Yeah,
because
so, I mean,
it's very
that's why I
domain
wanted to be
specific.
very careful in terms of like how the merging is happening. I mean, so
Yeah.
if you're doing any form of merging within pilot, I don't want to take any specific like arbitrary decisions that we end up having to change, and then it becomes a backward compatibility nightmare.
Yeah.
So instead, if we do the dumbass merging and we simply say this still actually solves it, and then when we have Gale in place and we have a dependency injection framework, people can have arbitrary preprocessors that actually pulls in all the configurations and decides to sort, order.
Well, I mean, Sriram, we do have a get out of jail, right? If we pick an arbitrary merge algorithm and we think is reasonable, and we've done some research into what we think is reasonable, we can always tell people who are still having trouble to go back to single resource, right? They have an out.
Sure,
right?
yes. Yeah.
And later on, when we figure out our Ackling model and we want to have delegation, if they want some different separation of concerns, right, we can push them down that path. So I'm not overly concerned with implementing a merge in line.
It's going to be part of our API. Like when
it is part of our API, but at least we could. But people can get a different behavior if they choose a different means of interacting with the API.
Right.
They get to make that choice.
Yeah. Well, to echo Sharon's point, that's why I want to be careful of what we put in pilot. A tool is easy to change and doesn't require, doesn't mean that pilot implements some behavior that we know that we will want to change. When we add this behavior to pilot, that will become part of our API. That is a publicly exposed feature. People will depend on specific orderings, and we will break them when we change it. And so then we're in the exact same situation that we are now, where users are complaining. They won't use a tool to fix it, even though that would address the.
So we can say that we'll never change it if we pick something that we're moderately happy with now.
But
I think the two are orthogonal, right? Like once you choose an algorithm, right? It's orthogonal whether you do it in pilot or you do it in another tool.
No,
like the dependency remain, they would not want to change the.
It's not true. I think we misunderstand each other. I think we all say the same thing. I mean, Louis was saying that we have some minimal stuff defined in pilot, and that's reasonable. Zach is saying you can also have a tool that is doing a slightly different thing. I mean, you may want to have more sophisticated rule or something like that. That's also possible. And we said that you can use tools already with whatever merging you want, check it in with the CI/CD system, and you get exactly the result we have today.
So I
tools plus pilot.
So the tool will just result in the creation of a single
you can have
merge service that gets committed into Kubernetes and we're
it's not one tool. You can have 10
of course,
tools.
but that is somehow like anybody can do that right now.
Yes, that's the point.
Right? With whatever algorithm, arbitrary or not arbitrary they choose.
Yes.
Right? But the question is, what do we support natively, like in pilot, right? So we will have that algorithm where we set the exact match and so on, right? And it will be in pilot done in memory. And I guess we will have some maybe istio-ctl command or something to be able to actually dump the result. Even if it's not saved back in CRD, we need to be able to say your rules got merged in
we
this
already
way,
have this. That's
right?
part of the config dump. I mean, that's debugged.
Right.
So, Andrea,
one that will need to look at all the resources. Let me just display the chat.
Yes, if you're using a tool to merge a set of virtual services, that tool must necessarily see all of the resources you're merging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
My point is that I don't want things to land in pilot that are part of the API before we are confident that that's.
And I agree we don't want too many things to land in pilot, but at least the most conservative ones that we discussed don't seem unreasonable.
So
and they are proven by Kubernetes ingress, so it's not really.
So I think one concern that Zach is bringing up is correct. Like once you do a convention-based merging, even though we are not changing the API, going forward, people will expect the same behavior.
Yeah, it is clearly part of the API, right? We'll have to document merge behavior and say that that's the contract. And say if you don't like that contract, go do something else.
But we could keep the convention very, very small by simply we will concatenate the services from two different virtual services and we'll push the catch-all prefix to the end. That's it. We don't actually move the exact matches to the beginning and then.
So I mean, Sriram, I think we do have a difference of opinion there. I think moving more refine matches to the beginning is a better approach. It's a more stable, more durable approach. And that has been proven out in the industry, right?
And scalable.
Right. And it is also...
Can there be some kind of annotation that you set to pick the algorithm? And
I mean,
no, please don't.
I mean,
Yeah,
so like, to be frank, we could do that in the future, but I don't think we want to do that now.
I think you have to go with a linear approach here, like not make the most complicated things first, like just, offer something. And
So,
then...
I mean, the reason I'm saying is that like even end up picking the most like exact matches on top, right? If somebody has a like exact match for foo and a prefix match for /foo, and they say like, no, my service came first, and I want to have like /foo prefix be matched rather than...
Right. We tell you to go and create a unified resource or use delegations, Sriram.
Or use tools. We use exact tools.
Right. At some point, we have to document the kickout, right?
True. Yeah, that's true.
And the rule with exact first, prefix second is what servlets has been used since 2000. So it's a rule that is pretty well known. And
right.
Sorry to bring servlets.
It's not just servlets, right?
It's not only servlets.
Right. There are many other web
that's a
frameworks
standard
that do that.
Yeah. Okay.
So right now, does Kubernetes do prefix matching, regex? I don't think it does regex.
If you look at the Nginx ingress controller, it tries to do a specificity ordering. Like what I put in the issue is actually what the Nginx ingress controller does for Kubernetes.
Yes.
Because people might actually expect the same behavior they have seen already.
Right. So there's a reason why I picked that.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's probably a reason why they picked it.
Okay.
Is there a general rule for what kind of logic belongs in Pilot versus what logic belongs in Galley? Like, is there a principle we're trying to follow when we decide that this stuff goes into Pilot versus Galley?
So if it's domain specific to networking, it belongs in Pilot.
Yeah.
If it's tied to the ACLing model or resource ownership models, it probably belongs in Galley.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I think that Galley needs to deal with multiple components, right?
Right, that's the
Pilot mixer, citadely. If like you extrapolate and you have 100 components and each of them brings their own domain specific checks and validation to Galley, Galley will become like bloated, right?
Right. I mean,
trying to do it.
A good thought exercise here is that Pilot will take configuration from multiple different systems, right? And will have to be responsible for producing some reasonable representation of the network from that merged view, right? So Galley can't pick up concerns that Pilot would have to take to be able to do that, to meet that requirement.
Right, but if the only plug points we have are in Galley, like if you want to customize the merging, are we going to make that an extension point inside of Pilot?
Remember, Pilot gets the API, right? You can decide to merge before you call MCP.
Right, okay.
Right, so that's Galley or not Galley, but it's still before Pilot.
I think Martin or Jason wanted to say something.
Yeah, so regarding what belongs in Galley, I think ultimately it's going to be more than just things around ACLing, because at some point, as we start to separate what components consume from what consumers write, so having a notion of service config or workload config, there's going to need to be some domain-specific transformations that are performed by Galley before delivering to the components. I'm not saying this merging thing belongs in that category. I just wanted to clarify that it's not such cut and dry yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna be iterating on this. Right. There's a tension there between richer, more unified resource semantics, like service config, which is a unification of many concerns, and merge across multiple configuration domains. Right. That's something we're gonna have to work on.
Well,
So
that's what we're discussing here, to split.
We're not going to solve everything today.
So you need to keep in mind that the HTTP routes is not just a route. It has timeouts, it has fault injections, it has mirroring and redirects. So, and it has CORS policy and append and remove headers and all other stuff. So I guess we could just pivot everything based on just the match condition alone. But then we have to do the same thing for TCP as well.
Sorry, what was that in the context of, Sriram? Merging or? In
the context of merging. So we have
to define merging rules for TCP, WebSocket, every other protocol, right? Yeah. The merging rule could be order, right? Timestamp order. I think for TCP, we can have something similar in terms of prefix specificity because, right, TCP is a hierarchical namespace, just like URIs. Exact TCP IP matches come before site arrange matches. More specific site arrange matches come before less specific site arrange matches, etc.
Yeah, I guess that's.
I'll say that this is yet again. Sorry, what term?
Exact. I mean, SNI has the same semantics and like
again, it's hierarchical namespace.
SNI I agree. But for CIDRs, I mean, it's so difficult to allocate IP addresses and manage IP addresses that I'm not entirely convinced CIDR is very.
Well, we at least would say exact IP match would come before site.
Yeah, maybe.
And I mean, they really are hierarchical, right? So at least we know. While site arranges are difficult to allocate, it's not difficult to understand that they represent the hierarchical namespace.
But the world is moving to where pods and kind of getting allocated.
Which is why we mostly expect people not to write site arrange matches.
Exactly. So we should not focus too much on it.
But we need to lay it out because if we change it later, it's going to break people.
Like it matters. This is yet more reason I want it to be a separate tool and not in Pilot, because it gets complex. As we add every protocol, we have to do this exercise. And HTTP, it's relatively straightforward. Other protocols, that is not necessarily true.
Well, so today, anything that's TCP based is probably easier than HTTP because our matches are purely based on a hierarchical. We don't have infix matching at all. I can't regex match an IP today. So it's actually easier. WebSocket should be relatively straightforward. It's if we had a protocol that was purely key value based in its identifiers, right? Then we'd be in a world of hurt. Right, because there'd be no obvious
base things too. Like Kafka, we have some notion of topics and that kind of thing, but like, we're not necessarily guaranteed that there's these clear hierarchies.
Yeah, people should go create separate virtual services for Kafka.
By the way, how do you do HTTP with headers though? Because our HTTP match is not just a path; it has like path, URI, authority.
Right. Then if you want exact ordering, right? If you can't guarantee that you have partitioning of your name matches, you got to move into a single resource or a delegate model.
I don't know. That's fine, but I'm saying when we merging, how do we do that? Because when we have multiple matches, don't
timestamp ordering, Sriram.
Yeah. As long as I think we document it well, explain what our convention is. It should work fine, even though it's predictable for outcome. Right?
As long as people read the documentation.
It's just going to get super complicated because the match is not just. It's not.
That's why we have timestamp as the catch-all. It's like at some point we're going to give up.
No. I'm saying even without the timestamp, if we have like 3 virtual services and one of them has like port plus this and something else that's like no port and this, or like they have, I mean, we have to do, it's a multidimensional match that we have to do in Pilot for every time we compute the map of virtual service, and then we actually serve it up to all the sidecars. And okay, I think we'll know when we implement this. So that was my.
Well, and yet again, why I don't want to implement it in Pilot first, because we don't know until we actually get in and implement it. Because he is correct, right? We do have these complex match conditions. So like we can handle paths relatively easily. We all agree on that. We can't handle the port matching, the in those things, and make there's not an obvious ordering there.
Yeah, so think if
we evaluate the condition.
If you have it as a tool, your tool will have to do the same caching that Pilot does. So your tool will end up being fairly complicated, right?
Well, but that's fine. But changed, right? I mean, tool is like people can change the tool before they redeploy the same services.
The goal is to be able to iterate more quickly and not have something that is part of our API contract that we release and then is there. The goal is.
All right, so what we can do, right, when we have multi-dimensional matches, say you have path and port, right, is we say that the ordering for port is undefined, right? So we very strictly restrict it, right? Now we can go and fix that later if a customer raises an issue and say, hey, when you merge, you should give precedence to something that has path and port over something that only has path. Right, because it's more specific, right? But I'm not sure we need to.
So then what are we going to do when that breaks the other customer? And that customer comes and says, hey, you used to do it this way, and now you changed it, you put the port first.
By the way, keep in mind that
like, you can't win.
Right, we have like path.
Yes, but the only question here is how hard we lose, right?
Right, and so I think that we can choose to not lose at all, by punting to tooling until the community gets consensus on what is reasonable.
The community's never going to get consensus, Zach. There's literally no way, other than this meeting, where we're going to pull everybody into a room and get them to agree. But this is it.
We already agreed. I mean, I think we already agreed that prefix and exact
Costing,
yeah.
Like if you HTTP match condition, we have ports, we have headers, we have gateways, we have source labels, we have URI, authority, method, and scheme. And
sure, but
now you have to make an ordering based on, like, given two match conditions, how will you order them based on?
So I think what we agreed is that we first take the rules that have only exact matches and we apply them, no matter what. If they have something else, they are not only that. I mean, if a rule has only an exact match, it's applied first.
Define exact match. Yeah, if
it has URI, it has hostname and hostname and port.
Only hostname
port and path.
No other facets.
Which is exactly what Kubernetes ingress does, basically.
Well, it is still an exact match to have port, and gateways and source labels and then the URI.
So how about this? Like, we need to resolve this among ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to come to agreement, if we're going to implement this in pilot, what the matching precedence is. We're not going to do it here because we don't have enough time.
Yeah, we're already out, by the way.
So let's collectively invest in trying to come up with a very precise set and see if we're happy with it.
A very small initial.
It might be more complicated than we necessarily want, because some people are concerned about the fact that I'm concerned about specificity, and people are concerned that if we incrementally add stuff to it later, we'll break people. So it might be better to be more sophisticated now and be done.
As long as it can be implemented in a scalable way. I mean, as long as it has a way.
So yes, we all agree
that
we want
to quickly call it a meeting. So what do I suggest is we have the document, we have the issue. So where should this discussion take place?
I think right now on the issue.
On the issue. Okay. So let's debate on the issues. And so is the document still
so Sriram,
up to date?
You and Zach raised a set of concerns about ordering that I think are valid. So maybe just the first thing to do is dump in what your concerns are with the proposal, which doesn't take the other multidimensional aspects into account. Right, and then we can go through and propose something.
And how
I think it's pretty reasonable what's in the thing now. Like, I think that is a reasonable subset to take.
But I think there might be some gaps that we need to think about, and that we should cover it.
And for every match that we define, how it will be implemented with O1 operations or that all steps.
Yeah. I mean, in Kotlin, we can always do post-ordering stuff of the actual Envoy config if we're really concerned about ordering the actual match tree. Like, we can always do that. Doesn't have to happen at the virtual
server. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I mean, I understand.
It's very hard if the API doesn't support them. It's much easier to have an API that is strict.
Okay, I think we will not be able to close completely on this issue. That's why we have to take it offline, and because we are already 10 minutes over. So thank you very much. Very good discussion, and I think we did get to some agreement, on many of the topics we discussed today, right? So it's just a matter of fine-tuning the details, really, like the algorithm and everything. Okay, all right. Thank you. Bye.
Cool. Thanks.
Good.